Let's turn our attention now to the new Premier League season. It all gets underway with the defending champions Liverpool taking on Bournemouth on the evening of Friday, the 15th of August. Delighted to say we're joined by someone who made over 200 appearances in the Premier League for the likes of West Ham, Newcastle and Portsmouth. And that is Shaka Hislop. Shaka, how are you? Thanks for joining us on this Sporting Planet.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome, Natalie. No problem at all.
Do you know what? It sort of feels like a funny year in the sense of when this last season finished to the new season starting, football's just continued with the Club World Cup,
Yeah,
and obviously we've had the Women's Euros. But that doesn't mean we're not excited for the new Premier League season, are we?
absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as usual. As you say, it's been an odd summer in that some clubs have been in action, some aren't. You're not sure how that's going to affect their pre-season, or more to the point, the start of their seasons, or the season in general. So there's a lot of unknowns, well, around Manchester City and Chelsea. For the others, it's the unknowns is kind of a transfer window that I guess we didn't see coming in some cases. I'm talking about Liverpool spending. Arsenal have strengthened in a much needed department. So it's kind of all to play for here.
It is, isn't it? Let's start with last season's league champions then. You mentioned Liverpool, and you mentioned the big spending, of course, Shaka. They're the big spenders so far. They brought in the likes of Jeremy Frimpong, Florian Wirtz, of course. That's the big ticket item. Hugo Ekitike, and maybe even Alexander Isak as well. It looks quite ominous, doesn't it, if you're not a Liverpool fan this season? They could
Yeah,
run away with it again.
it really does, especially when you consider, listen, yeah, Liverpool were deserving champions last season, and I know Manchester City had an off season. I'm sure we'll get to them. But certainly the last 3 or 4 months of the season, once Arsenal kind of fell off, nobody was even close. And the bigger question was Liverpool the best team in European and world football? PSG kind of put an end to those discussions, and deservedly so from a PSG perspective. But Liverpool have gotten all the better, certainly domestically. We see how that pans out in European football. But again, they've, for as good as they were last season, I think they're a whole lot better. They have not diminished in any department.
Yeah, I mean, with all the players that Ed has just listed, and the possibility of more incomings as well, with Isak maybe a centre half too, which is what
Hmm.
many are suggesting they need as well. I mean, it just feels as though one, they're striking while the iron's hot from a position of strength because they are the Premier League champions. But my goodness, I don't think anyone saw them spending as much as they are doing, Shaka.
No, they didn't. Knocking on 200 million in two players in Ekitike and Wirtz, and another 100, somewhere about. So if Isaac does arrive, just kind of given who the Fenway Sports Group have been throughout their ownership of Liverpool Football Club, I don't think anybody saw this coming. Liverpool can spend. We know that they're a big football club, but we're talking in the region of 300 million plus in a summer. I nobody expected. You expect that from Manchester City, but nobody expected that from Liverpool. Not with this ownership group and how they've spent in the past.
For me as well, it kind of feels like this window signals the proper end of the Jurgen Klopp era and the start of a new era, whether that is the Arne Slot one or not, because you've essentially got two new fullbacks on both sides in Frimpong and Herkes. You've got a new central midfielder in Wirtz, possibly two new attackers. That's a whole spine. I mean, next season, this could be a whole different team, really.
And it really could. And honestly, to his credit, it's not easy taking over from someone like Jurgen Klopp, given what he represented to that football club. Just ask anybody who's tried to succeed Sir Alex Ferguson how difficult it is to fill those shoes. But Arne Slot comes in, wins the league, and I think that goes a long way to not only securing his legacy, I guess, but certainly filling that void from Jurgen Klopp, and players and fans buying into Arne Slot as manager. And now he's been back by the ownership, and this, yeah, to your point, about it really is his team. If there was ever any doubt during the course of last season, this really is Arne Slot's team, which I guess adds a certain amount of pressure as well. But he would welcome that. You manage Liverpool regardless of what that spending is, what it looks like. There's pressure to it. On a slot, Sydney has reveled in that, and now has kind of made this team his own.
So when you consider the amount that they're spending, what is the minimum that's going to be required? It's not just going to be the Premier League, surely.
I think I Premier League without question. Well, a trophy, a significant trophy, and be in the race for whatever else is to offer. So, argument's sake, let's say they win the Champions League, they've got to chase down whoever's top of the Premier League all the way to the end. Liverpool have got to compete in or for at least the two major trophies, the Premier League and the Champions League, winning one. And you see how the cups are always so difficult to predict, especially the Carabao Cup, where most big team managers make wholesale changes. The FA Cup, sort of, at times, they do make changes. If memory serves me correctly, Liverpool made changes for the FA Cup for last season. Whether Arne Slot does the same again this time around, we'll see. So yeah, you have that an excuse as to going out early in those competitions, but certainly the two big ones, you've got to compete. But to that point, I thought they did wonderfully well. Well, of course, this season winning the Premier League, you go to Paris and win, and okay, PSG, who certainly in the second half of last season have proven themselves to be not just the best in European football, but all of a sudden propel themselves to be in the discussions around the best teams we've seen of recent years, of the last decade, overturn that result, and PSG go from strength to strength. So the bar was set last season for Liverpool, and they've got to, at the very least, match her.
Can I just say on this whole Alexander Isak thing, and when we're recording this, he hasn't signed for Liverpool, but who knows, the transfer window is moving so quickly right now. By the time this comes out, he might well be a Liverpool player. First of all, I'm an Arsenal fan, Shaka, so I'm very angry because he told Arsenal, I'm not leaving Newcastle, I'm not interested in the move. We went off and signed Gyökeres. We'll get onto Gyökeres in a bit. And then suddenly he's changed his mind and says, I'm happy to leave the club and I want to leave the club. And now, obviously, this is opportunistic from Slot. If Isak's available, you're going to try and take him. But I'm not sure he knows how he fits into his plans, because he was going to have Ekitike as his number one striker. So where do we go with all this? And also, should Newcastle, obviously you being a former Newcastle player as well, be very upset that he's been tapped up?
Look, we start with Newcastle. Newcastle have every right to be upset. And now, tapping up is part and parcel of the game. It has been for a long time. I'm under no illusions about that. I think the weird, I guess, sequencing of events around this is, to your point, that Isak says he's not going anywhere, be it Arsenal or Saudi Arabia, and then all of a sudden things started to happen quickly. Now, I suspected that Liverpool were speaking to Isak, and then Newcastle started to speak to Ekitike as the replacement for Alexander Isak. Ekitike says, nope, I'm only going to Liverpool because Liverpool are sounding out different options. It's like I'm only going to Liverpool. And as a result, Newcastle say, well, we don't have a replacement for Alexander Isak. We're not accepting bids. Ekitike completely moved to Liverpool, and then all of a sudden it just starts to spiral in terms of Isak, his position, what he wants to do, and it put Newcastle in an awkward position in that their number one target as a replacement has committed to Liverpool. They then go searching as to who can we get. Sesko is the latest of those names. We'll see what comes of that. Sesko by no means a like-for-like replacement at 22 years old. Certainly physically, he's not who Alexander Isak is. So again, you're not sure how that works out from a Newcastle perspective. So Newcastle have every right to be upset in that how quickly this happened, and they weren't able to secure who they would prefer to be their Isak replacement. From a Liverpool perspective, Ekitike, you're right. I think he was brought in kind of with the thinking that he would be their preferred, he would be their starting number 9. Albeit they weren't able to get the number one choice in Alexander Isak. They spent a lot of money in bringing Ekitike in, and then Isak, for whatever reason. And again, the odd thing is, and as I say, tapping up is a part of the game. So what's today's? We're the end of June, but I don't think communication between between Liverpool and Alexander Isak started 2 weeks ago. I think that communication had to start 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago. And why it waited until now to all of a sudden kind of take on this gravity about it is a little confusing to me. What happened in there? What happened during that period? But whichever way, it seems that Liverpool are going to get Alexander Isak. Ekitike, who plays in the same position, now all of a sudden becomes a very expensive second choice or rotation player, albeit he's young and you may and it's probably a good investment in the long term. But just in terms of spending right now, that's an awful lot of money to spend on someone who you're not quite sure is going to start.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it does have a knock-on effect. You've already mentioned the Benjamin Sesko link, but there's also, if Edward's laying his cards out on the table, I'll lay mine out as well. I'm a Brentford fan, Shaka. So this has a knock-on effect for us because Johan Wissa has been linked with Newcastle as well. And just on the Newcastle side of things right now, without Isak, where do you think they end up? I mean, they've got Champions League football to contend with this season too.
That's a big question. That's a good question because Isak has been so important to Newcastle over the last, was it 3 seasons since he's been there? And I think that kind of showed itself not just last season in Newcastle qualifying for the Champions League, but the season before where he had a lot of injury issues, and you saw how that affected Newcastle's season, albeit a season that also had Champions League football and Newcastle adjusting to that. But by the expectation coming to that season 2 years ago, Newcastle were disappointing, and I think a lot of that was because of Alexander Isak's kind of injury issues during the course of that season. That settled down, and you saw how it played out in terms of results, in terms of league finish last season. And now without him, and again, if you get Sesko in, he's a good option, but he's not Alexander Isak. He's still learning the game. He's 22 years old. How does that pan on for Newcastle? Because I think a lot of how Newcastle plays goes through Alexander Isak. Whether Sesko is that player who can play on the counter attack. He's tall. Newcastle have fantastic wing play as well. So maybe it is more about getting the ball wide and getting those crosses in. So Newcastle will have to maybe change a little bit of their approach. So there's so much to this that as we sit right now, it's just an unknown. I think kind of given where everybody else are, I still think Liverpool, Manchester City, Arsenal, I think Chelsea right now are ahead of Newcastle in terms of where they are and expected league finish. Outside of that, I'm not sure who else. So at best, I'm thinking Newcastle finish fifth. Kind of given the fact that again that striker position is an unknown, and you expect a surprise or two from somebody. Seventh or eighth is also not out of the question for Newcastle.
Yeah, Newcastle were just here in Singapore, actually, as part of their preseason tour. I was hosting that where they played Arsenal, and they looked light without Isak. I thought Elanga did well, having recently just joined. But when he looked at that bench, and they ultimately ended up losing to Arsenal in that match, it looked very light indeed. Let's move on to Arsenal then, because as I was hosting that event, it was all very exciting because we got a heads up from the Arsenal comms team that Viktor Gyökeres, who just signed that morning, or it had been made official that morning that he'd signed, could well turn up at the stadium. And right up until the last minute, we weren't sure whether or not his plane was going to make it in time to walk the pitch and be unveiled before that match. And I was able to unveil him onto the pitch. And my first thing I've got to say is he is a big, big man as he walked past me. He's 6'2", but he's thick and stocky. And I just feel like he's going to be such a handful for defenders. And finally, Arsenal have signed a striker for the first time since, Aubameyang in like 2019. Yeah. Is this what Arsenal need, Shaka? Are they going to win the title now?
Whether they win the title or not, I mean, the easy answer is time will tell. But without question, it's what Arsenal have needed for quite some time. Listen, and I've been fairly critical of Kai Havertz. He's not an out-and-out striker and did as well as he could. But Arsenal have been screaming out for that pure centre forward for the last 2 or 3 years. And why Arteta hasn't addressed that issue before now, I find a little bit confusing. But they got their man. Certainly they got a player in a very good player in a position that's much needed. Now, I think in terms of Arsenal winning the title, and again, I as you said, I make Liverpool favourites. Manchester City, again, I'm sure we'll get to it. Is this odd conundrum because surely they can't be as bad as they were last season? If we remember Manchester City of seasons before last, you expect them to be there and knocking on the door at the absolute least. Surely last season is a one-off. So I don't make Arsenal favourites. But if Arsenal are to win the Premier League, you've got to get 25 goals from Gyökeres, and you have got to get a same return in every single department from the rest of the team. In that you still have to be as good as you are on set pieces. You still have to have Gabriel and Saliba and as critical as some may be, myself included, around Arsenal's reliance on set pieces. You still have to get that return from set pieces. You still have to be as selfish defensively. You still have to, well, let me not say still, but you have to avoid injuries in key areas. And why I took back my still is because of Saka's injury last season. You saw how that impacted Arsenal. You avoid some of those key injuries. You get a return from you get a similar return from everybody else, and somewhere between 25 and 30 goals from Gyökeres. You're in the conversation without question. But all those things have to come together.
The thing is, they've been in the conversation for a few seasons now.
Mhm,
Mikel Arteta. I know he won the FA Cup in his sort of first season in charge, but nothing else has come to fruition. Now they've got that striker in. I mean, the pressure surely ramps up for Arteta that he's got to deliver something, and it has to be something big.
Yeah, without question, and the pressure ramps up because, as you mentioned, he's for the amount of time he's been there, for the money that's been spent. Listen, finishing second to Manchester City there's no real harm, there's no real hurt in that. Kind of given who they are, how they spend, given who their manager is. But then all of a sudden, you get Arne Slot coming in, winning the title in his first season, and that adds pressure to Arteta. It says, well, if Liverpool can do this with a new manager, how come we haven't been able to take that extra step? And again, it all coincides with Manchester City being as poor as they have been under Guardiola. But it certainly has, well, both neutrals and Arsenal fans alike asking serious questions of Mikel Arteta. And I think this season he has to deliver. And while, yes, he's been in the conversation, and the record books will show Arsenal's now finished second, what was it, 3-4 seasons on the spin. They've been in the conversation probably through Christmas, through February, maybe even March. But come April, it's not really been much shouting in terms of Arsenal's title charge. At the very least, you've got to get to the end of April, May, and the title is within touching distance, and have everybody kind of looking at remaining fixtures and guessing as to where points will be dropped. If we aren't doing that with Arsenal in the first week of May, then I think it's a disappointing season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Arsenal spent, what, £180 million so far this window. They could spend more if they get Eze
Mhm.
in as well. He has to win some significant silverware. Otherwise, I do feel his days are numbered. And on that note, I'm just a little bit worried that perhaps we're putting too much expectation on Gyökeres's broad shoulders. He scored, I think
Comes
it
in
was
the
54.
territory, though. It comes in the
No,
territory.
I know, it does. But I mean, this is a man who scored 54 and 52 in Portugal's Premier League, where Darwin Núñez was tearing it up a couple of seasons ago, and we saw what happened to that when he came to Liverpool. So, yeah,
Not only same. Not only Darwin was it 37 or something in roughly the same number of goals. So
yeah.
no, I get the point and I get the comparison, and I understand the concern, especially if you're an Arsenal fan and you've had enough of people telling you, giving you a hard time about finishing second. But certainly in terms of strikers and their availability, Gyökeres was second only to Alexander Isak, certainly in terms of English football. And we've discussed the Alexander Isak kind of timelines. So I think it's a move that Arsenal and Arteta had to make to bring Gyökeres in.
Let's talk about maybe a team like Chelsea, who, if you go back to when Todd Bowley and Clear Lake took over, we were all sort of scratching our heads with the money that was being spent, ridiculous sums of money. And they were bringing in youngsters who were all thinking, hang on, you kind of sometimes need to keep experience in your team. But anyway, fast forward to what's happened this summer in the Club World Cup. They are world champions. They can say it. They can put the star on their badge and everything like that. Do you think something like the Club World Cup and winning that and beating PSG like they did, and many people expected PSG to win that one, do you think that can be a significant boost for them coming into this new season?
Yes, it does. It has to be a significant boost to them. It also adds a little bit of pressure to Maresca and this entire squad. Now, even so, and I thought, listen, give Chelsea their credit. I thought they deserved that win against PSG. I am one that I did not see that coming in a month of Sundays, given how good PSG have been. I thought PSG kind of were very good during the course of that tournament as well. Maybe not great against Bayern, or albeit winning 2-0, and then even more disappointing in the final against Chelsea. But give Chelsea their credit. Give João Pedro his credit. I think he came in and added finishing a spark, certainly in terms of his movement and his link-up play with the likes of Cole Palmer, in a way that, with the greatest of respect, Delap and Nicholas Jackson hadn't done during the course of the summer. And indeed, I don't think Nicholas Jackson has done probably since Christmas of last year. Well, up to then he was kind of good. So give Chelsea and João Pedro their credit. But then you kind of see some of the kind of head scratching transfers under Clear Lake and Todd Bowley. Todd Bowley, who's kind of stepped away from the limelight a little bit more than he was to start with. I'm sure he's trying to put some separation between him and those early months. But for instance, the speculation around Xavi Simons. Now, I like Xavi Simons. I think he's a good player. I think he's a very good player. But you sell Madueke to bring in Xavi Simons. That for me is confusing. I just, those kinds of things for me just kind of show that Chelsea are still a little bit scattergun in their approach. They've had a couple of very good hits, João Pedro, Cole Palmer, who have mentioned, along with others. Caicedo has come really good during the course of last season, so they've had their hits, but just every so often there's just these moves, these transfers, this speculation that just has you questioning. No, and again, for as highly I think of Xavi Simons, I probably do more so for Madueke, certainly in the Premier League, given who he's proven to be in the Premier League for Chelsea. So these kinds of things just kind of make me question Chelsea and some of the things that may be happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, I guess the good thing for Chelsea in that Club World Cup campaign is it allowed players like Cole Palmer to refine their form as well, because he was struggling towards the end of last season, and then suddenly he becomes the player of the tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think anybody questions Cole Palmer's talent or his importance to Chelsea. But you're right, Edward. Towards the back end of last season, it was decidedly poor. There's no, by what we expect of Cole Palmer, he was poor. Very good in the latter stages of the Club World Cup, especially, and against better opposition. So hopefully that's the spark that he needed. So again, we see it, and it's the odd thing about talking about Chelsea and their prospects, and especially in the context of this Club World Cup, is how it changes Chelsea's preseason. And again, as we discussed from the top, how does that lead into the start of their season, exertions during the course of the season? Will there be injuries? There's just this unknown around those teams that have played in the Club World Cup, and how it affects their preparation, how it affects them long term. So again, because this is unknown territory, it's difficult to kind of surmise as to what direction this all goes for them in particular.
Yeah, I think even at the start of last season, Cole Palmer didn't get off to the best of starts. And he even said it was due to the Euros. And so you do wonder if, as you say, the Club World Cup, what impact that will have on him and everyone else. Then you're heading into a World Cup the next year and then another season on top of that. There is an element of player welfare. We've discussed that plenty of times on This Sporting Planet, and you'll be able to find that on previous episodes for sure. But if we switch to another club then that also competed at the Club World Cup, Manchester City, they, like Chelsea, got a lot of their business done early on when the window was open for a short period. And it was interesting that Pep Guardiola said that he wanted to trim his squad down because he didn't like having such a big squad to deal with, because he didn't really like disappointing his players. And they've got a little bit quiet since then, albeit that they brought in James Trafford, haven't they, for a British record for a goalkeeper. But as you've mentioned already, they can't have as bad a season as they've had before. So from what you've seen of them at the Club World Cup and all the new players that have come in, are they going to be one of the closest title challengers, or is it really just a two-horse race with Arsenal and Liverpool?
I think almost by default you have to include Manchester City, and it's I'd put last season down to a one-off. That default being, and while you're absolutely right, Guardiola has just made, which I thought was kind of an odd statement, that needed to trim his squad. He's the one who kind of brought those players in. And listen, I get it. Kind of given the injury crisis during the course of last season, they spent a lot more in January than maybe they would expected or usually do or would have liked. But then to make that an issue, I don't know why Pep Guardiola did that. That aside, by their standards, or more to the point, by everybody else's current standard that we've seen during the course of this transfer window, Manchester City have been remarkably quiet. And maybe to that point, Guardiola is just happy with his squad, happy that Rodri is back fit and playing again, and confident that he was the reason, he was the one factor around City's disappointment last season. So maybe that puts City back to where we knew them to be two years ago. But it's just so difficult, kind of given the quality that we know that squad has, given the goals we know that Erling Haaland can score, given the player that we know Phil Foden can be, who he wasn't last season, and you kind of give him so much around Marmoush's addition in January and the impact that he had when he came in. You just want to feel that this is going to be City closer to who we know of 2 seasons ago than who we knew last season. And as long as they're closer to 2 seasons ago, they are again going to be in the conversation. And if you think about Manchester City in those good years, when they're at their best, what they did better than anybody else is manage the second half of the season. When teams start to tire and cup competitions start to become a factor, City somehow are at their best, at the very least, in the league. So you cannot discount City as we sit right now.
All right, so we've mentioned the main contenders, but I don't think we've actually kind of decided who will win and who will be in those top 4 spots. So let's get some predictions before we let you go, Shaka. Should we start with you? We'll start with the guest of honor.
So I'm going to go. You want me to run through a top 4 or just give you my top 1? How are we doing this?
Let's do it. Let's do a top 4.
All right. I'm going to go Liverpool to win it, Arsenal to finish second, Manchester City third, and Chelsea fourth.
Kind of is where I would go with that one as well, Shaka. I just can't see anyone beating Liverpool. With the strengthening that they have done this summer, I just think it is really ominous for everybody else. And it does feel as though everything is coming together for a bit of an old school top 4, shall we say. It's a bit sad, really, because I can't see Aston Villa. I mean, Aston Villa have barely done any business. I don't even know if they have done any business. Newcastle are obviously in a situation of losing maybe their best player. Forest can't have a similar season again,
no.
I assume. So yeah, I just sort of feel it's got to be that 4 that you've said, and probably in that order as well. Go on, Edward. You're going to back the Gunners?
I am, only because I can't bear us to finish second again. But I think honestly we probably will. But I'm just going to be the optimist. I'm going to say Arsenal in first, Liverpool second, City then Chelsea.
Let me just say, everybody needs an Arsenal fan in their life. I have never met a more optimistic bunch than Arsenal fans.
And hang on. You haven't met Brentford fans. We've gone through a summer of
You've got
turmoil.
nobody left.
We've got no one left. And we're all still saying we're going to be all right. We're going to survive. So just a quick word, Shaka, on the relegation pictures. We've seen in the last couple of seasons, the three that have come up from the Championship have gone straight back down. This time we've got Leeds, we've got Burnley, and we've got Sunderland. Do you think one of those three, if not two or all of them, can stay up? And how do you see that relegation picture?
I think of the three, there's only one has a possibility of staying up, and that's Leeds, and I give that a very slim possibility. Um, I I'm partial to Leeds, I'm because of Ellen Road and that fan base. I love playing there. I love who they are as a football club, and so I say Leeds more from my heart than from my head. But the other two, I don't see them staying up. No.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it, to make that step up, as we've seen. And Sunderland have gone big in this window. They've spent over, 100, 150 million so
Yeah,
far.
but
And they've
for
won Granit
Newcastle
Xhaka.
though.
They've got Granit Xhaka in as well. I know you can't say
Oh
that.
yeah, I
You're
played for
right.
Newcastle. So I'm
Wrong person's fault.
I'm
Wrong person's fault.
contractually obliged to say Sunderland are going straight back down.
So your three to go down are the three that came up?
No, I'm going back in Leeds to survive. I don't know who takes their place, but I'm back in Leeds to stay.
So long as it's not the bees. That's all that I care about.
You'll be fine. I think if any of the existing Premier League teams are going to go down, I think it might be Wolves, because I think them without Cunha are going to struggle.
Yeah, it's a good shot actually.
I actually think Palace is a bit of a problem, only because, and I say this only because they haven't strengthened. Oliver Glasner is desperate for players. He said recently they've only got 17 outfield players, and they've got European football as well. That could be a bit of a problem. I love Palace, though. I'm not saying I want them to go down. I think that's an issue to consider as well. But it's a horrible situation for whichever club has ended up in it, as we all know.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for
Thank
being
you very
with us
much.
today.
I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, you can come
Thanks,
again.
Shaka.
You're an honorary member now.
Pencil it in.